Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm JR, and Eddrick Houston from Ohio State got injured on day one of the fall camp practice. I got my guy Jeff McMichael, Big Jeff from Big Jeff's Insights, our episodes, talking with me about it here tonight. Jeff, Eddrick Houston, this is a huge injury for Ohio State. People were very unsure with what would come out, what would happen. Pete Thamel did tweet on Thursday night that it does not look like the injury is super serious, not going to be super long term. However, we don't have all that much clarity on it. We do have some speculation about what the injury could be. I'll get to that in a second, but your overall thoughts on Eddrick Houston going down, possibly missing some time at a position that is already not super deep for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason we're talking about this. Going into this season, the number one concern for people that follow the Buckeyes is the defensive line, but more specifically, defensive tackles. And it's not the talent of the starters, it's the depth. So, Eddrick Houston, young starter along with Caden. Is it Caden McDonald?
Yep.
I just
No.
wasn't sure of his first name, but both from power schools in Georgia. Eddrick Houston went to Buford, and they're like preseason 10th ranked in the nation right now. So always really good. So he's played at the highest level. Probably been chomping at the bit to play more with all the other Ohio State starters that have now graduated. So this would be the one position area that Ohio State could not afford to lose someone. Because remember, for Ohio State, you're talking about looking to win a national championship. That's what they want to do every year. So this would have been pretty devastating, frankly. I do maintain Ohio State's line is kind of getting short shrift as far as I think their starters are going to be really good. But people forget is, yeah, they lost a lot on the line, but it means if Sawyer, for example, and Tuimola would have came back, not came back last year, they had experienced people in Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson ready to go. At this point now, those guys are men. They're men waiting to come in. And so people are totally underestimating. They're not just, they're starting for the first time. These are men who have been with the program for many years. And so that's a major factor. I think Ohio State line could be really good, but not if they have injuries. So, to hear that it's not long lasting is great. Hopefully it's not one of those injuries, JR, if it's, and I doubt it's a hamstring because hamstrings are those types that can pop up more and more. But if it's a lineman, I have a feeling it's more he got rolled up on and it's like below the hamstring. So those are just kind of some initial thoughts. And, it definitely would have been really bad news if he was something out for the season.
Yeah, and the range was there for that to be a possibility. Before we get into what it could possibly be and how long he's out for, I do want to say your point about JT and Jack and the other defensive linemen for Ohio State, the guys on the interior being Tyleek and Ty Hamilton last season, is very apt because those guys, Tyleek Williams missed a lot of times in fall camp last year, but he came back and he was just fine. Well, one of the reasons why he could do that is because he was in college for 4 years. I believe that was his fourth year of playing. Maybe it was his fifth year. But anyway, he was in college for a long time, so he didn't necessarily need the fall camp, right? In the NFL, a lot of these veterans don't practice as much in the early, volunteer practices and stuff like that because they just don't need it. They're more concerned with resting their bodies, and that's kind of what you got from the defensive line last year. This year for Ohio State, you need these guys practicing in fall camp, even though Eddrick Houston is probably going to be a very good player for Ohio State. People are banking on that with the experience, with the practice, with the development. He's only a sophomore, albeit a five-star sophomore, but he's only a sophomore, and he needs this time to practice. So I saw some people saying, well, as long as he's back for the Texas game, that's fine. Jeff, you tell me if I'm crazy, but even if he's ready for the Texas game, I don't see him getting a big number of snaps, number one, because they don't want to get him re injured, possibly coming back in the first game. And number two, he just won't have as much time to practice as some other guys.
Yeah, you raise good points, and even why he's out there. And when you have young people, you still get better in practice, and especially at a program like Ohio State where you're going against really good defensive linemen. Sometimes you're getting better reps in practice than you are in actual games, depending on who you're playing, especially early in the season. So that's why, and for his development, you want to play. There's technique and everything, and the only way to get better at a sport is to do the sport. So, I do think that's important. Yeah, it is interesting. You say, would they hold it out? Yeah, for that first game, I'm thinking more long-term. Obviously, it would be big for him to be out against a school like Texas for sure, but it is a non-conference game. If you're not really confident he's not ready to go, you do risk the re-injury, and you don't want that coming back to haunt you. I remember, think of Ohio State, Jackson Smith and Jigba opener against Notre Dame. I think he tweaked his hamstring, but they tried to bring him back in like 2 or 3 weeks later into a game, and it happened again. And basically they end up losing him for the year, really is what happened. You don't want that to happen. And especially, JR, this does come back to the difference when you have a 12-team playoff. If Ohio State goes 10-2, they know they're going to make it, right? It is helpful, though, to have a better seed for sure, because you're going to have an easier first-round game. So I don't want to make it sound like just make it. It doesn't matter where you are. That's not the case. But just making it still is the key, right? And so it could end up with, to your point, JR, where they might have a decision to make, and I really think they would lean toward not playing him against Texas. If that were Penn State, that would be a different story we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, if he only misses like a week of practice or something like that, probably gonna play him. But if he's out, all of fall camp or nearly all of fall camp, he'll be at the very least limited in that Texas game. So I talked about the possibility of what the injury could be. There was a video circulating around social media of the injury. So if you're not aware, media is not allowed to take video at these practices. The first practice was open to the media, but it was also open to the fans as well. And the I guess security of the Ohio State football team doesn't get on the fans nearly as much as they do the media, because they paid to be there and they're fans and stuff like that. So, but somebody did get a video of what happened in practice. I'm not going to show it to you here, just because I don't necessarily like showing injuries on on the show. But from what people could tell, and from what a doctor weighed in on, Jesse Morse, he is a sports medicine physician, and this isn't one of those fake doctors on Twitter. I went through his stuff, and he's actually a legit guy, speaks at conferences, does a whole lot of stuff, and one of the Ohio State beat guys tagged him on it. He said it looks like a right knee hyperextension. Best case, you're looking at a bone bruise scenario. That is probably a recovery time of about 4 weeks. So all of fall camp around that time. And then worst case scenario was an ACL plus MCL tear there, with it not being super serious. They're saying I doubt that it's that bad. But if they're saying it's not super serious, I'm saying it's probably close to the best case scenario. You're probably looking at somewhere around 3 to 6 weeks in this. That's not a doctor's opinion. That's me guessing based off what a doctor tweeted. What are your thoughts, Jeff? You think Ohio State be okay?
So it's interesting, Jerry. Were you able to see his reaction and how much pain he looked like he was in with the injury?
No, not really. I mean, the video kind of shows you a little bit of how he went down, but they did say when he walked off the field, he was not putting any pressure on the leg or anything like that.
That's not so. And then the reason I asked that, my son actually tore his ACL on a motor scooter at 10 years old in my garage. So we're familiar with this. And I've seen other kids, in high school and in middle school. And when you have that injury, ACL, usually you're in a lot of pain. Like that's so I think we're pretty safe to say it's not ACL, just because typically that comes with a lot of pain. Not always, but typically.
Well, and sometimes those are more non-contact, right? I mean, that's what happens is sometimes offensive linemen and guys just running with no contact. That's when I say it's the worst. He was definitely in contact in this video with the offensive lineman, so you're not looking at anything like that. I think the biggest thing they were concerned about was an Achilles tear, which is what Seth McLaughlin, the Remington award-winning center last year for the Buckeyes, went through late in the season in practice.
Yeah, and that might be worse than an ACL because you're talking long. So yeah, I mean, definitely an impact. I mean, it's really impact for the Texas game potentially, right? That's what we're talking about here. That's the issue with those big games early on, and the whole disincentive to maybe play those games when you want to be healthy for your other conference games. and when the conference, and winning a conference championship, if they're going to put a premium on that, it's a disincentive to play those non-conference games. So, but great to hear. I mean, injuries, separately, my son had that shoulder injury. We were talking about that on our regular Thursday night podcast and everything. Just football, that is the most brutal thing about football, is just the injuries, right? I mean, they work so hard. You work harder at football than most of the other sports. It's a tougher game and everything, more difficult to play, more commitment. So I don't wish injuries on any of my opponents, and great to hear that Eddrick hopefully would just be out a few weeks.
Oh, yeah, let's hope so. A couple things I want to ask you, and these are quick things, and then we'll get out of here, Jeff. The odds for Texas at Ohio State on FanDuel right now, Ohio State is favored by 2.5 over Texas. This is a home game, so typically in those scenarios, you say this is pretty much a push when you look at it, when you look at the home loss and stuff. Do you envision the odds changing anywhere around here? Do you think Eddrick Houston would be a big enough person? He's a huge person. He's about 300 some pounds. But do you think he would be a big enough impact to change the odds, or are you going to be monitoring the odds at all to see anything here?
That's a great question. I mean, it's always possible a point, but nothing dramatic. I mean, and not that a point's not insignificant. Vegas is so good at what they do. A point matters a lot. It's amazing how often a point matters. But really, I don't see that, like dramatically changing things versus, say, an obvious one like Caleb Downs or Jeremiah Smith, obviously. So, and really, it is interesting. That's telling you they think on a neutral field that this is basically a push game, which is why this is such a cool game to start out the year. I mean, couldn't ask for any better. And everyone waiting to see if Arch Manning is the real deal. The other thing I would say on this too, though, is one of my rules is never the opener. Don't overreact to the opener, even though every year everyone totally overreacts on the good side or the bad, often to the opener. It's just in college football, there's no preseason, and yet all these teams are expected just to hit the ground running and be amazing from the start. If you've played sports, you'd know that's just ridiculous. So that's why those that know, don't overreact to game one.
It's like Ohio State versus Notre Dame a few years ago when Ohio State's offense only scored like 21 points or something like that. And everybody was like, oh no, the offense is terrible. It's like, no, it was actually just the very first game of the year.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to come out and, play perfect offense when you've been, pretty much in fall camp all season.
That's exactly.
All right, last thing I'll bring up, Jeff, and then we'll get out of here. Backups for Ohio State. Sounds like Eric Mensah was the first guy to go in after Eddrick Houston came out, but I think that, this is fall camp practice day one. It was probably just closest guy. Throw him in there. You're getting some conversation about Tywone Malone, the Ole Miss transfer. He's a veteran. I believe he's, if not a senior, a redshirt senior. So he is somebody that comes in, not been super consistent at his time at Ohio State, but he is somebody with that's been a vet. He was on the team last year when they won the national championship. Is there anybody coming up behind Eddrick Houston here you're looking at, or thoughts about the depth of the defensive interior defensive line?
I'm definitely not an expert on the backups for Ohio State. I'm familiar with Malone, though. The reality is, if he hasn't gotten significant playing time, that tells you he's pretty much a last resort option. So that'd be pretty bad news for Ohio State if he was playing. If he was good enough last year, they would have brought him in the rotation a little bit. So that'd be a step back. And then Mensah, a really young guy. I was touting how experienced a lot of Ohio State starters are. The backups at D tackle are very inexperienced beyond Malone. So that's problematic. I think, isn't the Smith Jr. also, was he?
Yeah, so I was going to make that point.
The
I believe Smith Jr. is more of a one tech. So that was kind of the thought process coming out of spring, was they didn't really have a one tech behind Caden McDonald. They had a number of 3 techs, but they didn't really have a 1 tech. And I think it sounds like Will Smith Jr. has put on some more weight, and he might be transitioning over to more of the 1 tech, which you need that because that 1 tech obviously can get very tired from how big they are and how much run stopping they do. So if that's the case, it looks like Eric Mensah and Taiwan Malone are probably your 2 guys there, unless somebody pops up that I'm not thinking of right now.
The other irony of this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it Hiro Kanu who transferred to Texas? And
Yep.
here he maybe could have been the starter with Houston out. And wouldn't that be ironic if he played well for Texas? And wouldn't that be a storyline?
It certainly will be, and I already saw Ohio State fans lamenting the fact that he transferred, and I do not blame them at all. He would have been a nice piece to have here. So, all right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you're listening on podcast, there's your update on the fall camp stuff. If you want more information on fall camp, everything going on, Zach and I will update you every Sunday and Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. We'll have a lot of fall camp intel, news, stuff like that to talk about here. So we'll talk about all that. And then, of course, on those nights, we'll also go through and talk about every single Big Ten team, different topics, things like that we'll get to. And then you can check us out on Thursday nights, me and Jeff, for his Big Jeff Insights episode, where Jeff will share information from his many articles that he writes over on his website. Jeff, tell people about your website really fast, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, bigjeffsfootball.com. Many good articles up for the upcoming season. And then on X, you can see bottom right, follow me at Big Jeff's FT Ball. Appreciate it.
Love it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.